right. Karina, well, thank you again for setting aside some time to chat with me. I'm really excited to have a conversation. I know we've kind of had this scheduled for a long time and just went through some technical issues, but I think we're good to go. I'm looking forward to like diving into things with you. So I think the best place to start is to kind of give you the floor and have you give kind of the quick, kind of high level overview of Mariposa Wellness and what you're building, who you're building it for, and kind of what your mission is.
Great. I love that. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So Mariposa Wellness is an educational company, and the idea is around stress management and what I like to call essential skills, which some people identify as professional skills, which are around communication and listening and having empathy and understanding for each other. And at the core and the mission of Mariposa Wellness is to create a toolbox to deal with everyday life challenges. And obviously that is a metaphorical toolbox. Sometimes I have to point that out. And these are things that should be easy, accessible, and simple to do and can be done in like 10 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes throughout your day that will help with everyday life challenges. And that's really the core of Mariposa. And then we go into deeper workshops and deeper trainings, but that's really at the core. And I created it to really support the caregivers caring for others and teaching them how to better take care of themselves in order to better take care of others. And I predominantly launched it in hospital networks to work with the staffing of hospital, and then moved into general employee population, corporate employees, tech, financial. So then moved it on in that direction. But originally it was started to care for the caregivers. But I think everybody's a human being and everybody should have access to this, and everybody should build that toolbox for themselves to deal with everyday challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a lot of questions on kind of the ups and downs and how things changed and the different go-to-market strategies and all of that complexity that comes with going through benefits programs and corporate and all the other avenues that I'm sure you looked into. But before we do that, I want to kind of go a little bit back or maybe even way back in your story, well before founding your company and just sort of your background and sort of what led you to founding the company and sort of the origin story of, I would say, not just of the company, but of you as a founder. Tell me a little bit about the path that you took to get here. And maybe that's a long story and you can go, feel free to go as far back as you think is relevant.
Sure. It's actually not that long a story. I don't think it. I mean, it was to some people it may seem like a completely illogical progression. To me, it's a totally logical progression. But so I started my career in fashion and sports. I've always been an athlete. I've always cared about health and wellness. It's always been something that's directly inherent to me and part of my life, part of my whole family's life, the way we all grew up. We all played college sports. I have 3 brothers, only female. So
yeah. What sports? Can I ask
sure,
what sports mainly?
So I played collegiate tennis for a couple of years, downhill skiing. Skiing is probably my biggest love of anything. I think
Wow.
it relates to what I do for a living. I feel like when you're on a mountain, just to digress, but it kind of relates, is when you're on a mountain and you're on a chairlift and then you're coming down the mountain, you're so focused on not breaking your leg or breaking bones or doing something stupid that you really are focused on that moment and being super present in that moment. And it's a sport that forces you to be present and be outdoors and in an environment. And then when you're going up a chairlift, really all you want to do is enjoy the outdoors and the beautiful scenery and the view. And so like at the end of the day, whether you're skiing 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, however long, you're exhausted. And then you just want like a great meal and go to sleep and do it all again. And I think it's one of the best stress relievers there is. Yes, it's a rough sport if you haven't grown up doing it, but for me, it's that fits. But I also competed in horses and jumping and stuff like that. But I also got into meditation and yoga at a very young age, or high school. So that's all kind of traveled with me. So with all that, I then went into I kind of brought all my loves together of fashion and sports and moved into product development of when the world was uniting. I mean, now we're much further along, but when I got into it, it was this whole idea of brands developing in the sports industry, and Ralph Lauren and Donna Karan and all these famous brands deciding they wanted to do sports oriented
Mm-hmm.
products. And so that's what I did. And I spent many years living in Asia and factories in Asia, and then factories in South America, and product development, and then moved, was sort of exhausted of living backwards, because when you work in Asia for hours, you're sort of, but your clients and your team is in the US. It's,
Yeah.
you're never really sleeping. And then I transitioned into becoming a creative director for a sports network in Spanish and Portuguese throughout Latin America, which eventually was sold to Fox and is now today Fox in Espanol, and then became a business development for a professional Latin American golf tour, which was the equivalent of the PGA in golf. Um, and we did 12 professional tournaments in 9 different countries, which was pretty intense and serious. So I sort
Yeah.
of woke up one day after spending all my 20s and 30s living on planes between Asia and Europe and South America and doing all this crazy stuff, and was like, okay, now I'm thoroughly exhausted. And where do I go and what do I do? And I noticed that what kept me, and this is why to some people it would sound like my career didn't go in that direction, but to me it was logical. But it sort of, I sat down one day and decided what kept me going and what helped me not become obese or to be completely like crass, like a drug addict or an alcoholic, or, popping pills and all that. And it was having a practice, Dan. It was really having something that was grounding me in
Mm-hmm.
and my wellness. And I was a crazy person that would get off the plane in Hong Kong and go to the gym to deal with jet lag, right? I was pretty crazy and strict about my nutrition because it's what kept me going, right? And having a practice and having those elements and that discipline is what allowed me to travel the way I did, and work the way I did and perform the way I did without, like I said, having severe health issues or addictions. And
Mm-hmm.
I woke up and I was like, how do I transition into doing this for other people? And how do I meet that stressed out founder or executive person on the other side of the desk that I was? And how do I help them? And that was really the impetus for starting Mariposa Wellness. And I decided to take a step back and spend close to 4 years studying alternative therapies and alternative medicine and alternative physical therapies, and
Mm-hmm.
worked for 3.5 years in hospitals in New York with patients, mostly post-op surgical patients of spinal, knee replacement, hip replacement, and cancer predominantly. But when you work in hospitals in New York, you end up covering a whole bunch of things, gunshot wounds, whole other fun things, um,
Yeah.
and learned a tremendous amount. And originally I thought I will create Mariposa Wellness to do one-on-ones and work with people with chronic illnesses or chronic aches and pains or chronic headaches or things like that. And then after working in the hospital for that many years, I realized, wow, someone needs to take care of these employees and the staff, because
Mm-hmm.
they don't take care of themselves and they take care of all of us. And
Yeah.
so, like I said, it sort of weaves in and out, but there is a logic, and the logic goes back to health and wellness and caring about it and finding my pillars of support and wanting to transfer that messaging, but also saying, what can I study and what can I go deeper in order to transfer that messaging, and not just dive into it and say, okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
my experience, but I really went back and took some time to study and have a
Yeah.
logical path on that.
Yeah. So kind of that angle of being able to provide care, for caregivers to, help them do what they do. Was that something that was sort of at all a common theme? Did you see other companies focusing on that around and also like around what year was this that you were in the very early days of iterating kind of what the idea was?
So Mariposa has been around for a while now. It's just
Yeah.
crazy for me to think about, right? Because sometimes I think it's still a startup, but I guess at this point, maybe it's a small business. Yeah, I don't know. So I have been a vendor of New York Presbyterian of the hospital for over 12 years at this point. So Mariposa Wellness has been around for about 15 years. So yes, I love your question because when I started this, no one was doing this.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
started this, companies were doing their sort of wellness proposition for their employees was smoking cessation, or like it was the beginning of like uh, steps. And it was the beginning of giving people the watches to monitor their
Hmm.
steps, and, all that starting out. And like, the concept of wellness was pretty much that, right? And,
Yeah.
and maybe some nutrition, maybe some, if a company was pretty advanced, maybe they gave you like some wellness dollars to, become a member of a gym, or they would
Hmm.
do a deal with a gym chain where the employees could get a discount or go in for free for X amount of time. But that was it. That
Yeah. Yeah.
There was nothing of this idea of stress management or looking at employees as whole beings, and helping them understand that there's a direct correlation. And it was a really interesting time to build out ROI, because that was the question consistently. It's like, well, if we invest in this for our employees, like what's the
Hmm.
return? One of my favorites is that not New York Pres, but a different hospital network. I actually did an analysis, Dan, and I said, okay, give me your pizza budget. I was like, tell me what you spend on pizza for your employees' lunches once a month, and I'll tell you
Yeah.
what I can do with that budget. Just give me like just once a month your pizza budget, and I'll tell you what I
Yeah.
could do that will improve the health and wellness of your employees. And they were
Yeah.
floored. And I was like, here's your return on investment. Give me 1 week your pizza budget, and that's it. And they were like, what? And I was like, yep, it's what you're spending on
Yeah.
pizza.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely sounds you were ahead of the curve there, because my first, and I haven't had a corporate job in probably like 8 years, but like my very first sort of corporate job right out of school, 2000, 2007. And yeah, that kind of stuff. No, I have no memory of ever that being a discussion or a benefit or anything that was pushed. However, I do remember we had free pizza for this large company every Friday. So it's very funny you bring up the pizza budget, because I often thought like, man, the pizza budget of this company is pretty insane. And I was like, I wonder if like there would be better places to spend that money. And yet, yeah, nobody was thinking about sort of wellness. That wasn't quite yet. Well, at some point it kind of became a buzzword, but I think the as it started out and grow and kind of grown and evolved, I'm sure that was something that you were sort of growing and evolving right alongside with it, because it seems like you were looking a few steps ahead, where that was something that people would be thinking about or should be thinking about. It just kind of took a while to catch up, maybe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started all this, it was like 2012, 2010, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a lot of explaining of like, well, we invested in steps, or like I said, or smoking cessation, or maybe a nutritionist, or maybe a gym membership. And I was like, well, you've got to go beyond that, because and that's all great. Don't get me wrong. Great. Support it. I support any of it, right? But let's talk about what's really making an impact on your employees, and how do you really make that impact, right? And so there is a huge part. That's why I like to say that Mariposa Wellness is an educational company on multi levels of education, right? It's educating the benefits and in HR on how to speak to people that approve the budget, right? It's also education for the employees themselves. So it's multiple levels of education, yeah, and that's gone on throughout the years, and as you
Hmm.
said perfectly, it also constantly evolves, right? So the pitch of 2012 or 2010 is definitely not the pitch of today.
Yeah. And then the other question I had, and this is probably a little bit of a loaded question, and maybe a question that gets answered a little bit later in the journey or the story of the company, but you were talking about ROI and sort of talking about services and ways to provide much needed wellness education or programs or services, whatever that umbrella is. How did you sort of navigate that part of it of explaining the ROI? Because it's such a hard thing to do, I would imagine, right, for a company. Or is that just part of the education that you're talking about?
Both. It's
Yeah,
incredibly hard conversation. It's incredibly
yeah,
hard because it's a very difficult thing to measure, right? Because you're talking about human beings. And also you're talking about um, people being willing to open up about things and say things and be honest about things too. So we went through the gamut of, like I said, okay, initially I said, let's do surveys. Let's understand um, if your employees are finding value in this. Like, let's forget the actual financial, like, invest in this, come out in this, what is, but like, let's look at the value of the proposition of wellness for your employees. And so we did a whole bunch of surveys, and again, super simple because people hate to take the time to do that. A lot of times we did it before and after a session, so it was like immediate, and it was like super simple, like, how do you feel right now? 1 through 4, whatever. Tired, overwhelmed, great, whatever. Circle whichever one. And then, like, how do you feel after the session? And then there was always, do you find value in doing this? Yes or no? And that taught us a lot, in the sense of then there was concrete, like, black and white, that HR and operating and finance could see that, and that helped a lot, because they said, oh, the employees find value and they enjoy it. And then there was always a comment section, so some employees actually took the time to write comments, which was also super helpful. So did a lot of that. And then there was stuff that I suggested. They wouldn't give me the information, but I know that they went back and did it, which is measuring claims, insurance claims, measuring days that the employees took off, measuring behavior of certain employees. Now, HR can't divulge that information to me, but I would give them sort of a list of questions and be like, can you please go and measure the following and check on the following? And I don't need exact numbers, because I know legally you can't give them to me or any of that, but you can give me an idea, or you can actually measure the impact. And and that's why I go back to the educational part, right? Once I started to educate them on that aspect and how to look at it, they then turned around and they were like, oh, so here are concrete ROI points that I can look at, right? Also, like, employee complaints. You know, there was, I can't say who the client was, but there was a client I had who, there was an employee with a serious anger management issue. And what was incredible was we were able to measure pre and post, and we were able to resolve his anger management issue
mm,
without ever having a direct conversation, without ever bringing it up, just through the wellness program that we had created for their employees. So there are touch points and specific things that you can look at, but yeah, it's a big educational thing.
yeah, yeah. And I might have jumped ahead a couple steps because I want to take a small step back. When you were first sort of developing or at least refining, what the wellness program was going to look like and how it was going to work. What did that look like kind of on day one, where it's like, okay, we've got an idea of exactly what it is and how it's going to work, and how are we going to now go out and start to reach the right people with this, and whether it's marketing or sales or some weird combination of the two. Like, what did that look like kind of on day one? Because I'm sure, like you said, it's been years of evolving and changing, but like I'm kind of curious that like right when you were starting out, what did it look like?
It looked like finding an ally, and it looked like who's willing to take a flyer on this with me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I got, I think, right place, right time sometimes is a fact, and
Hmm.
luck sometimes is a factor. And I was fortunate enough that um, New York Presbyterian Hospital had just hired a new person to manage their HR wellness. They were trying to figure all this out. And
Hmm.
I met her at a conference, and it was like we sat down and we were like, okay, how can we do this together? And like, how do we develop this sort of allyship and launch this sort of pilot thing together?
Hmm.
And that's really how it happened. Because before that, like I had mentioned, or did I mention? I thought I wanted to create Mariposa Wellness as a one-on-one company, meaning I wanted to work with individuals that were suffering from certain chronic things, whether it was like chronic headaches or back pains or anxiety or panic attacks. I didn't really want to do group. And then after spending enough time in hospitals, and that I realized, wow, in order to make the biggest impact, I need to look at groups and group trainings.
Hmm.
And also, um, not to sound cheesy or trite, but I really financially like to afford me privately versus to have a company or a hospital pay for these trainings allows a wider range of people to get access
Yeah.
to this that would never have access. And that was a huge goal of mine. Um, and so it was really finding an ally and a champion. And that sort of taught me in general that when I went to companies to pitch, it was about finding champions and allies within the companies that truly believed in this and said, okay, you know what? I'll try it for my team before we go to HR. Or I would go to HR and say, okay, try it for you and your team, and then we'll
Hmm.
roll it out to the general employee population. So, because in 2012, 2010, this was all, as we said before, it was all very new. Now, like I say, now there's like a million apps and digital and free YouTube, and there's so much. But when I was doing this, they were like, "What? You want to do what?
Yeah.
You want to wait? What?" Like it was.
Yeah.
So it was really about finding allies and champions and saying, "Let's test this. Let's grow these pilots together. Let's do the surveys. Let's talk to the employees." That's one of the other things that I really pride myself in with Mariposa Wellness is customized. I have always, throughout the years, made a specific point of saying this the program gets customized to meet the needs of the employees. So here are suggestions. Here's a structure that I believe in, but I want to work with you to meet the needs. So, which has taught me so much, Dan, throughout the years, because I hear the feedback as opposed to, I know that there's other companies that do similar to what I do, but they have a set curriculum and it's a set structure and it has to be this and it's always this. That's not Mariposa Wellness. There's a
Hmm.
base, but then there's also customized programming.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was going to be sort of a variation of like one of the questions I asked, because if you have, this very, successful pilot, and the way you sort of launched that was, like you said, a little bit of luck, right place, right time. But the point is you have that pilot. I would imagine it's not like you could just sort of pick it up over here and plug it in over here with a different company. Like that just would not work. Um, but I imagine you still had to sort of say, okay, here's what allowed this pilot to work, what made it work, and then that translates to this company over here. And I'm guessing too, like the more you were sort of finding new partners and new allies and new avenues to go um, do that education and get people using this program, it probably evolved quite a bit as you were working with new clients and new teams and new I don't know, maybe even new like industries? Like what did that look like? And was that something that happened kind of quickly, or is that something that was a little bit of a slower burn over time?
Great question. I don't think. I don't know. That's a great question. I haven't actually stopped to think about whether it happened long or quick. I think, when you have some really big clients that deal with a lot of different things, like whether they're corporate or they have call centers or they have a trading floor, um, as well as different angles, you begin to learn different things from the actual employees and what works for them. So I think it happens quickly and slow at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I
Hmm.
I remember a great example was, I had a senior supervisor nurse come to me and she was like, I want to do something for my team, but I don't have any time. So figure it out. And I was like, and at the time, all the sessions we were doing were like 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour. And she was like, yeah, no, not on this floor. Like, figure it out. And through
Hmm.
that came the 15-minute or 5-minute huddle, right? And I was like, all right, let's figure this out. And then I had other people that were like, we have a town hall and I need to calm everybody down before the town hall because they're about to hear maybe not so great news.
Hmm.
What can you do in 3 to 5 minutes? And I was like, all right, let's figure it out. So it was like things like that happened pretty fast because, again, it goes back to customized of what people need, right?
Hmm.
Same thing with the evolution of the workshops. Like, I remember I had an HR person come to me and she said, oh, we're transferring offices, going from middle management to senior manager to having their own private office to an open floor mat. um, and only very senior people are going to have private offices and everybody else is going open floor. And she was getting a ton of people coming into her office with anxiety attacks because they were
Mm.
saying to her, oh my God, I'm not going to have privacy, and I've always had my own office, and now what's that going to look like? And so we developed an entire workshop around boundaries and space
Mm.
and physical space, and what tools do you have to deal with that, and how do you
Yeah.
face that fear and that anxiety, right? And again, I learned from them. Maybe that would have never occurred to me, Dan, to be honest. um,
Yeah.
so it's a lot of, that's why I think it evolves fast and slow at the same time.
Yeah.
It's and a couple of things I always say to my instructors, and I believe it's like, there's Mariposa Wellness definitely has a mission statement and definitely has a method. Not gonna lie, we have a method, but I need 80% of the method to be out there and 20% of your personality to be out there too, right? I want people to connect. I want people to feel the authenticity and the truth, right? And how you're standing in front of them, but also having an awareness of who's in front of you. Like, here's the traditional script and here are the words you need to use, but you also have to have an awareness of who's in front of you. So you can't just
Hmm.
repeat the same thing, because when you're talking to a group of investment bankers, that's a different conversation than when you're talking to a group of ICU nurses, right?
Hmm.
Or emergency room doctors or any of that, right? They're all, or, a bunch of tech software developers, right? That's a slightly different conversation. Everybody's a human being. Everybody deals with stress. Everybody has emotions, good, bad, positive, all of that. We all have that. We're human
Yeah.
beings, right? But how you address it and maybe some of the tools that resonate are slightly different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm obviously a marketing guy my whole career. I've been in marketing, and I just hear lots of like very parallel, like thinking and strategies around, yeah, you're selling in a service or a product or, some holistic offering that's going to help a company accomplish XYZ. But all of the nuance of who, like you said, who you're talking to, and you could also have a team of ICU nurses, and then maybe a team that on paper looks pretty similar, not as drastically different as a bunch of investment bankers, but even the ones that kind of look different there might be like very small nuances that you have to pay attention to, and that's like with marketing. Like you on paper, two companies could look pretty much identical, but you really dig into the marketing and what their team looks like, what their audience looks like, the little differences and how the product is delivered or the go-to-market strategy. They could be totally a different approach and a different strategy. And unless you kind of have that marketing sort of I don't want to say a surgeon, but like you really want to take apart stuff and like, almost like a mechanic. You want to take apart the engine and really figure it out. It sounds like a lot of the similar kind of sort of marketing principles you were using to kind of understand people, and it's a lot of psychology and it's a lot of science and art and creativity, creative problem solving. So to me, that's super interesting that every team that you work with and every client's a little bit different. And I'm curious if you ever ran into challenges or issues where that flexibility and that sort of willingness to sort of customize, did that ever become like a challenge or a barrier that just you're like, hey, we want to do XYZ, but the way that the platform's built or the way that the services are structured, that's just not possible? Did you run into that where you almost were trying to customize too much, maybe, or any challenges in that process? I guess is what I'm
Oh,
asking.
there's always challenges in that process.
Yeah.
I mean, I even when it's so interesting that you bring up the like marketing and creative and art and all that, and behavior. Even when I started my career in fashion and product development, I always designed and developed and marketed based on psychology. And I do have a
Mm-hmm.
psychology degree, but behavioral science. Like I always said to when I managed a team of designers, I said, I need you all to stop and think why the eye is going to go to that product versus that product. Why the consumer emotionally is going to be attached to this versus this. Is it the colors? Is it the direction? Like I don't want you to look at it as purely like marketing, like the messaging. I want you to look at it from the emotional, instinctual attachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of why I say like you have to be aware of who's in front of you and how you're addressing it. So yeah, there's always challenges. There's challenges to people that there's always those sort of barriers, right? The budget people that have the barrier, or the HR that has the barrier, or the COO that's like, I don't want this, my employees to have the time to do this. I'll give you what I think is a great marketing example or communication example. When we were trying
Yeah.
with a client to title the program, and I was like, oh, is it stress management? Is it stress relief? Is it health and well-being? And we played with a bunch of names and sort of surveyed out to employees, like, if we called the program this, would you attend? If we called the program that, would you attend? And we learned something incredible. They said, well, you can't, please don't use the term stress in it, and don't use the anything of like sort of a negative connotation. They said, because then our supervisors and our managers, if we attend, they're going to think we're stressed out and we can't do the job, and they're going to
Hmm.
look down at us, and then I'm not going to want to attend because my manager and supervisor is going to think like I need stress relief, or I need mental health, or I need all these things, which means I can't do my job, which maybe I'll get fired. And you know
Yeah.
what, Dan? Interesting. Like that never occurred to me. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Right. But we don't
Yeah.
sometimes in the marketing or the communication, you go, oh, this is a really catchy name, or this seems like logical, but you maybe don't think of the repercussions of the value of language and the power those words had. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up coming with restore and relax.
Mm. Yeah.
Or like for another client, we just did Wellness Wednesdays. Super simple
Yeah.
and straightforward, and people are like, oh, I could do that,
Yeah.
and also like if I say the method of Mariposa Wellness of like a wellness session, and it has movement and stretching and breathing and some quiet time and reflection and things like that, people go, oh, maybe I'll try that. But if I turn around and say you're going to do yoga and meditation, they go, yeah, no, I'm going to walk. See ya. So you, again, meeting people where they're at is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, more of the kind of parallels with what I find over my whole career, just great marketing. And when I worked on the agency side, working at sort of traditional kind of creative, agencies, which was so fun to be a part of that. It was the again kind of the buzzword of like empathy. Like you have to have empathy for who you're marketing to or advertising to, and understanding your audience, and there's like, I think generally sometimes people think that empathy is like, oh no, I can see the thing up on the wall or the whiteboard. Okay, here's the audience is this age, and here's all the persona information, and this is what the problem that they have, and this, okay, we get who we're marketing to, but empathy is like really really like putting yourself in their shoes, and it's a process of like doing that and getting, it's like, okay, we get the problem, we get the solution, but okay, what are the feelings that they're like experiencing and feeling, and before they solve it, during solving it, after solving it, and then you could keep going layers and layers deeper, and that's more and more empathy of putting yourself in their shoes. And so that's obviously like important to marketing, but obviously to having the human touch and the ability to create products and services and offerings for an audience, which it actually kind of like segues into my next question, like having that like high like personal like human touch to what you're doing. Did you ever run into issues with um, having that be sort of a central like a tenet to what you're building, but like were there challenges to kind of grow it and scale it, and because of that personal kind of human touch, or is that just sort of always the challenge of like you have to do both and you got to just figure it out? How'd you kind of navigate that?
You got to do both. You got to figure it out.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
well, at the height of pre-COVID, in the tri-state area alone, I had 8 instructors with me. So it did reach a point where I couldn't do it all, like just not
Yeah.
physically possible in person. Was have always been incredibly, I think it goes back to marketing, very, very, very strict as to who represents the Mariposa Wellness brand, like what their training is, what their background is,
Mm-hmm.
what their education is, what their presence is, how they present. Like I would have them shadow me, train with me. Like I was very particular as to then who I would give the opportunity to teach in front of these clients. Also, these were not the easiest of clients, right? They weren't touchy feely clients, like I love my investment banker boys and my hedge fund boys or girls, or, but
Mm-hmm.
they're a tough crowd sometimes. And, tech can be tough sometimes, software developers, pulling them away from their computer, and obviously
Yep.
a hospital environment and having to be in an ER, these were not like for the faint of heart. This isn't like, and I would say that to my instructors. I'm like, you're not walking into a beautiful yoga studio and oming and having beautiful music. Like you may be walking into like some
Yeah.
craziness happening, and
Yeah.
really stressed out people and people that are walking away from a trading floor to do a session with you, but they are like, so you kind of have to, they were super trained and super strict about that. Um, so I kind of addressed the scaling thing, and in a way, the good thing about COVID was it then allowed me to be able to teach virtual, right? And that gave it a
Mm-hmm.
different element of being able to teach sessions live but online. And so there was much more depth in what I could, how many sessions I could teach a day because of the virtual. um,
Mm-hmm.
there was a while there that I had clients in LA and San Francisco and Atlanta and DC, and it was like a lot of Miami. It was a lot of flying around. Um,
Yeah.
and some of that goes away, obviously, with virtual, where you could do. I've also taught hybrid of virtual, which is kind of interesting, where some people are logged in and some people are in person. Um, Not gonna lie, there is an element of me that still believes that the power of a human in person is still the strongest.
Yeah.
But again, what you were saying earlier, we have to evolve and we have to develop and we have to accept to a certain extent that like this virtual thing is here to stay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we got to figure it
Yeah. Yeah. And, obviously COVID changes a lot for almost every company, like at the very um, obvious way that a lot of companies are like, okay, we have to like start doing things virtually, like you just talked about. But getting back to the core of what you're, helping clients and companies and teams work through, is a wellness offering and sort of a part of their wellness. I'm curious, how did COVID impact the business? Just because that is something that is so core to what you do. And it was something that got kind of turned upside down, because either you were working in a situation where it's like, okay, I was used to going to an office and now I'm totally home and the world seems like the world is on fire. And, I've had clients that were, in the mental health space. And so that obviously COVID started this whole new era of just sort of all these different, you know, um, uh, different ways of working with people just from in terms of their mental health because of what COVID did. And then you also have companies that were like couldn't be remote and couldn't be virtual, and so they're still sort of quote unquote sometimes literally on the front lines. And so health and wellness is obviously hugely critical in those times. Like how did that impact you in the short term and I guess maybe long term too?
it impacted me tremendously because in March of 2020, everything I did was in person. My whole team.
Yeah.
I had people also in LA and Miami and other places that worked with me. So my whole team was in person. Everything was in person. All our sessions, all our things, everything was in person. And all of a sudden in March of 2020, I had to massively pivot and figure out every virtual platform you could possibly use. Which was
Yeah.
not everybody was using Zoom. Some people were still using Skype. Some people were using Teams. Some people were using Google Meet. Some people were, it was like, oh my God. And trying to understand. And then I had some clients that were like, can you create entire video libraries for me, so that our employees could tap into that when they need to, because now they're working from home and we don't know when back to office. So like it really took a massive pivot of like going from everything in person to everything only virtual. And then not just virtual live sessions, but video recordings and editing and all of that. And I was like, oh my God, like this is not what I wanted to do. And
Mm-hmm.
um so that was also a challenge. And how do the logo and the thing and all of that as a marketer, and you
Yeah.
want it to look professional and you want it to be logical. And again, it was like based on Maripossa Wellness, so there were things that were 5 minutes and 10 minutes and 15 minutes and 30 minutes, and then there were full-on workshops, and it was like, oh my God. So that took a huge toll on me, on Mariposa Wellness, on how I message the business, and trying to relearn and basically go from 0 to 60 again. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that was a crazy learning experience. Um,
Yeah.
and then sustaining it and then moving forward and saying, okay, how do we do this as a hybrid, or how do we keep this going, and what is the messaging now, and also
Yeah.
what we talked about before, which is really interesting. It's a very different market today. It's a very different
Yep.
market. There's a lot more in certain ways. They don't do what I do, but there's a lot of saturation in a lot of ways of mental health and wellness and meditation and well-being and all this stuff, right? Um, I think that's also why I've evolved a bit into this whole idea of multi generations and essential skills and things like that, because I think that's very much something that I see needed. Not that I don't. I think
Mm-hmm.
wellness is still super needed and stress management is
Yeah.
still super needed. Um, it's just sometimes harder to compete all the time with all the apps and all those
Yeah.
things. So, um,
Yeah.
as a founder and business owner, you have to constantly think about what's the evolution, what's the direction, how do I sustain this, how do I keep it going, what are opportunities, how do I think out of the box, the creativity, where's there a niche, who can I
Mm-hmm.
impact, those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah. How much do you how much or how little do you pay attention to what competitors are doing outside of like if you like put all the sort of the ecosystem of all the different providers and tech companies and platforms and so it's like over the years it gets more and more crowded and you've got maybe different quadrants and each quadrant's getting more and more crowded. How much do you pay attention to what they're doing, what they're building? A lot of them are probably very niche in terms of what they do. Because I think from a marketing perspective, I tell clients all the time, it's like it's good to be aware of what competitors doing, but you can't be so focused on what they're doing because then you lose sight of your audience and your customer. They need to be the focus, but you do kind of have to be aware. Is that something you've uh, been able to do? I mean, you touched on it a little bit already.
Um, I do exactly what you said. I'm aware of it, but I try not to go down rabbit holes. I did at
Yeah,
first. I went through down major rabbit holes, and then I got them sort of thrown back in my face too. Like people were like, "Oh, but there's this one and that one and this one, and how are they different from what you do?" And blah blah blah. And I was like, "Okay, now my mental health is gonna go off the charts. Like I can't,
yeah,
And I've had so many people throughout the years be like, "Why don't you create an app? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that?" And, at one point I did invest and I was like, okay, maybe I'll create a platform and maybe it's for members only and I'll give companies access to the videos. And I sort of started going down that rabbit hole and I was like, but is this true to who I am too? I
mm-hmm.
think is it true to my messaging? Is it true to my core offering? Is it really what I want to be? Or am I going down these rabbit holes to try to compete against all these people because people are throwing at me and saying this is what you should be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very delicate balance for founders and business owners, right? I think you should be aware of what other people are doing, definitely, but also be true to yourself and true to your core and believe in your offering. You have to be
Yeah,
able to defend and believe in your offering and the impact that you are doing, right? Like
mm-hmm.
there's been times throughout the years, Dan, where people are like, "Oh, well, I found someone that does something quote unquote similar to you, and they do it for a third of what you cost." Okay, great, go for it. Go sign up with them. Have a great time.
Yeah,
Wish you luck.
yeah.
Like, great, you found it for a third of the cost. That's amazing. Go do it. 9 out of 10 times, what happens? They'll come back
Mm-hmm.
and be like,
Yeah,
"That's not what you do." I'm like, "No, it's not what I do."
yeah.
No offense, but like, I've been in this for a very long time, and this isn't just a company that I created 15 years ago. Like, this is really my life, as I said at the beginning of this. Like, I've been involved in this since I was a kid. Like, I believe in all these
Mm-hmm.
things, wholeheartedly. It is what I'm passionate about. So I'm not, and no offense to people, but I'm not like a 25-year-old that's done like a 200-hour yoga class or one meditation training and said, "Oh, and now I can go be a life coach and teach everybody everything." Like, that's not what
Yeah,
I do. Not negating
yeah.
that, you got to start somewhere. Great, do that, but that's not what I do. And so I charge accordingly, right? And I pay instructors accordingly, and I do things
Mm-hmm.
with logic in that sense based on experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit different. But it's a challenge, and you got to
Mm-hmm.
face those challenges. But I also, uh, I am a creative person at heart, so I do kind of love to always figure out like what's the niche and what's the next thing. What can we do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a lot of, I think, it's a lot of marketing, branding, positioning, because you could know that like in your heart, it's in your DNA. You understand what you do and why you do it and the value and how you're different. Because so many founders have that, like they know that, but to be able to clearly explain it and articulate it and have that be clear in the, because of course, like, founders, all founders of any business, like it makes sense to you and you get it and you put out, I don't know, your first website or your marketing or an email or a social post, or it could be anything. You could do a TED talk and it's like, yeah, that's exactly like it makes sense to you. But again, sort of that whole empathy sort of theme, being able to explain it in the way that your audience is going to get it and it's going to click and they're going to know it the same way that you know it is. It's not easy. It's just sometimes you're, as a founder, you're just too close to it and it takes time and it's a constant evolution. No one ever has the aha moment like, oh, we figured it out, like everything's good, because it's a constant thing. And I'm guessing since you've been doing it for so long and around for so long, like you've probably figured that out along the way. But that was kind of my next question, is in the sort of X's and O's of like marketing and messaging and positioning and putting putting things out into the world that talk about what you do. Was that something that came easy for you? Was it something that was a challenge? What were some of the things that you found that worked, kind of well for you?
It was a huge challenge. It was a huge challenge because I was trying to do something completely new, right? Again,
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
back 2012, 2014. It was a huge challenge because I had to figure out my messaging that had to resonate with people. And I did, Dan went through a lot. Like I was like, okay, I remember I had a champion and one of these brokerage firms that sell benefits to companies. And I was like, I would call him and I was like, get me 30 seconds, get me a minute with your client. I'm like, while you're having a meeting about other things, let me pop in for 30 seconds or a minute. And they were like, Karina, but the whole meeting, I said, okay, give me 5 minutes. I don't care. Just let me get in there and have them experience it, because it's very hard to put into words or on a document what I do without having someone experience it. And I would really push hard for people to be like, give me 3 minutes, give me 5 minutes, give me 30 seconds, give me a minute. And
Mm-hmm.
for that, the virtual worked really well, obviously, because I would say that throughout COVID, I was like, just get me in there. I'm going to pop in and pop out. And once people physically experienced it, they were like, oh, okay, let's have a conversation about it. So
Yeah.
it was very difficult in the beginning. Sometimes it continues to be very difficult to articulate it, to put it in writing, to put it in a postcard, a deck, a flyer, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Visuals help, but then you have to figure out the visual and do people identify with that visual or not. So yeah, it's a constant, I think, evolution. But I think your word of empathy also, and awareness and understanding, like, who am I really trying to reach? Who am I speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I want to close this deal? Right? Like, is it the CFO that's like, I don't want to give you the budget? Is it the chief operating officer? Is it the benefits person? Is it the HR person? Is it the broker that sells the benefits and brings you in as a vendor? Like, there's all
Mm-hmm.
these constant elements, right? So yeah, it gets slightly changed. Every proposal gets slightly changed. I play with the words all the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what resonates more and what makes more sense. Um,
Yeah.
but my elevator pitch after so many years, I would say, is pretty strong after,
Yeah.
because people have tortured me back, Dan. I've had some great mentors. I've had some great people turn around and say, like, nope, too long. Doesn't make sense. Faster,
Mm-hmm.
shorter, too many words,
Yeah.
too much copy, way too much copy, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
I actually just did that to a friend of mine that's promoting a program that she that's a great program. But I was like, this flyer is insane. There's way too much copy here. And I don't know
Yeah.
if she
Yeah.
really liked my bluntness, Dan, but she asked.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of founders need that. They need someone to say, no one cares about that. Like, but the context is, it's important. It has a place. But what you're trying to accomplish right now, the objective of who you're talking to and at what point in time and all the nuance, like they don't care about that yet,
Right.
is usually what that means. But that bluntness, yeah, is needed because it's so hard to kind of know, and it's a slippery slope of how much you're trying to say at one time. Um, and I know those early years are like, you kind of have to be a mad scientist and you're playing with stuff and iterating and trying stuff, and it just feels like it's never going to get figured out. Then it kind of does, like you
Right.
said, after a while.
What I was
Uh,
my biggest advice that I like to give founders or people that are just starting or building, it's three things. Don't be afraid to pivot. Pivots happen. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to take a step back and do less. It's okay. Doesn't mean you failed. It just means, okay, maybe I need to take a step back and refocus or relook at it. But like, that is part of being a founder. That is part of the evolution. Like, um, you know, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, right? Like going
mhm,
from, March 2020 in April of 2020 was a really tough, you know, sort of gut wrenching punch for me. But
mhm.
it's the life of a founder. The other thing I say to people is, not everybody needs to be a founder. It's great. It's amazing. I love it, but not everybody needs to be a founder. You have to be able to stomach it, right? And have those failures and have those pivots and be the mad scientist, as you just said, and be constantly willing to do less or more or change or bob and weave and figure it out, and sleepless nights and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you another bit of for advice, some really specific advice for other companies in either FamTech or the care economy or kind of future of work,
Hmm.
selling into the benefit space or to HR teams or companies where there are so many different like layers and decision makers, and you've got the folks who are going to write the check. There's the folks that are going to actually implement everything. There's the different teams that, like, it's so complicated, so complex to be able to do that. What advice would you have for other companies that are navigating that and trying to figure out, first of all, just the right channels to use to like reach them, and then once you do reach them, that's kind of half the battle. It's figuring out how to really successfully communicate with them and be sure that those things are moving forward. Like, what kind of advice would you have for teams that are working through that?
Wow, that's a great question. It's a bit loaded question there, Dan.
Yeah, and it's a big one. So it's and we've talked about some of it
Right.
already. But if there are any aha moments you had over the years, even that were things that helped, could be little things.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to finding allies and champions, right? Like, find allies that get what you do and understand it. And then they tend to lead you to the right decision makers and the right people that
Hmm.
hold the budgets, right? I think it goes back to what you talked about before of empathy. Listen to what the person in front of you is telling you. Like, truly hear them and listen. Don't be so focused on, here's my programming, here's my product, it's the best thing ever, it's going to revolutionize HR, it's going to revolutionize wellness, it's going to blah, blah, blah. Okay, stop for a second, do your pitch, great, we get it, but then listen to what the needs that person on the other side of the table is telling you, and figure out ways to make them a hero and part of your team too, right? Because without them champion for you and without them being a hero inside, you're not going to get it through, right? because you're gonna there's constant barriers, right? As you put it perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
there's the initial people, and then there's the budget people, and then there's the implementation people, and so you kind of have to figure out the different angles and say who is my best champion, who's my best ally. Like I said, for years I worked with a whole bunch of broker companies, and I would come in and do their wellness fairs, their health and wellness fairs. And a lot of times in the beginning, I did it for free, which not so much fun. But it again, it proved the need to the employees. It proved the need to the decision makers, because the employees would go back and be like, "Oh, that session during the health fair was really useful for me. That information that I learned was really valuable." And so when it comes through sort of that angle, then people start to listen. So you really have to
Mm-hmm.
take a step back, listen to who's in front of you, and understand you're going to hit walls. You're going to get, I just had a conversation with an HR person yesterday about getting ghosted and not getting response on proposals.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it goes back to being a founder and being able to stomach that, like, no response thing, right? That
Yeah.
being ghosted or being asked for a proposal and then they don't tell you anything. And, the other thing I learned, and I do this much more now than I ever did at the beginning of Mariposa Wellness, when people say to me, okay, what are the costs? Now I tend to turn the tables around and go, can you tell me an idea of budget that you have available? Because I don't want to go back and forth and you tell me no and I tell you no and we go back and forth. You don't have to give me an exact number, but go back, sit down and
Mm-hmm.
really think about what budget you can allocate to this. And I will do my best to work within your budget range, because otherwise we're just going to clash and go back and forth and back and forth, and then we don't
Mm-hmm.
resolve anything. And I and maybe it's recently because HR budgets and wellness budgets are really tough and benefits budgets are really tough right now. You kind of
Yeah.
see a sense of relief on the face of the person, like, okay. Like I've
Yeah.
given them a tool and I found a way for them to be like, okay, what is realistic here? And I really
Mm-hmm.
want to do this and I want to support my employees, but what can I truly afford? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, you're meeting them where they are. You're listening to them. You're finding a way to make them a hero and yourself, and get it through. But it is, I mean, not going to lie, right now, benefits are, it's a tough time. The costs of benefits have gone up. You know,
Mm-hmm.
companies are having a rough time with all of it right now. And so to add what they consider, sort of the non-traditional additional benefits, right? Not just healthcare, can be tough at times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think if you present it in the right way and you meet them where they're at and you try to work within their budget and you can show them the value, they'll do it.
Yeah. Any other interesting trends that you're noticing in the benefit space or HR space? I think usually it's generally you feel things are sort of trending up or trending down in terms of the difficulty of getting programs adoption and selling into companies. But are there other things that you're noticing that are just kind of interesting that you keep in mind for just kind of what you're seeing in the space, to which may influence or may not influence what you're doing for those companies?
Um, it's also a great question. I love your questions. All really good. Um, I have to think about that. I mean, there is definitely the growth of technology. We can't avoid it. That's probably the biggest trend, right? It's like everything is, an AI. We haven't even touched AI, Dan. There's
Yeah.
a lot of AI out there. Um,
Yeah. We could do another hour on
yeah,
AI probably, right?
exactly. My 2 cents on a couple of things with AI. What I say to employees that are stressed out and overwhelmed is, it's here. We got to learn to collaborate and cohabitate with it. That is a fact. But on the flip side, what I also say is human beings are human beings. And what scares me, genuinely frightens me, is when I get a call from someone that says, oh my gosh, I just discovered an AI therapist. And I was telling the AI all of my mental, and I was like, I'm so sorry. What? And I was like, you realize that's getting stored somewhere and there's an A. I'm like, this is not like HIPAA. I literally went into a
Yeah.
tailspin. Talk about going down a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
Dan, of like being
Yeah.
scared for that person that was like, oh, you really need to try it, Karina. It's amazing. And the AI gave me all, and I was like, okay. So those are some of the trends that kind of scare me a little bit that I'm seeing is this um, dependency or like launch of AI for everything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like how to train a sales team, use AI, mental health psychology, use AI. Like that kind of scares me. And I still think human beings are human beings. And I think that there is a pushback that I'm also seeing where people really want to meet up in person and want to do things in person and want to interact in person. So I think that we have to evolve on a balance, right? Like, same
Mm-hmm.
thing when we started to say, well, everything is virtual. And now companies are like, nope, 3 to 4 days, you need to be back in an office, right? Because
Yeah.
of the creativity, because the human interaction, multiple reasons, right? Um, I think AI is gonna, we have to learn to cohabitate and see the positive and work with it. We can't be afraid of it because it's here, but we also have to understand what are we really using AI for? And you can
Mm-hmm.
use it as a sales training tool or different tools of assessment or, mental health assessments. But at the end of the day, you still got human beings that need to be treated as human beings, right?
Yeah.
And so those
Yeah.
are some of the interesting trends I'm seeing and how we're dealing with them is pretty fascinating to me on the behavioral science side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing a lot of work on multi-generational workforces lately and how that impacts performance and interaction in the workforce, which goes back to the professional skills and essential skills. And
Mm-hmm.
AI is a big part of that in how different members of different generations interact with AI and are prone
Yeah.
to use AI or not use AI, and also how what in their uh, life is it what how they show up at the office or to work based on the influences of their upbringing or life, but not on a diverse issue at all, but purely of like
Mm-hmm.
a Generation Z person is completely technologically native, right? Like
Yeah.
they don't know anything other than always that, right? There's never
Mm-hmm.
been an analog period for them, right?
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
and then you deal with millennials that have a little bit of a mix, but then you've got the, Gen X and boomers that are like, Gen X is like, well, I went from like analog to digital to the internet to whatever. And then boomers who are like, I went from like, a radio to a TV to like a computer to streaming,
Yeah.
you know? And so there is a lot of that too. And I think those are some interesting trends in HR of like, how do we deal with these multi-generational workforces? How do we empathize with each other? How do we better communicate with each other? How do we meet each other where we're at? And what are the influences that bring us to the table, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
we function and how we perform based on those influences, right? So
Yeah.
pretty fascinating.
Yeah. The AI, the whole AI space is interesting. And even ignoring the actual like getting into the technology of how it's evolving quickly and growing like that's interesting. But just how people are using it today, good and bad. Literally could be another hour and a half long discussion because I'm super interested in it. So I have to always catch myself. Um, I asked a couple of kind of tough questions for you, put you on the spot, but I got a really easy one for you now. What what's sort of your sort of moonshot vision for the company? What you're most excited for, like 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or whatever the number of years? What just gets you really excited? Where do you see the company going? Are you not looking that far ahead? Or are you planning it out meticulously? I'm just kind of curious. What gets you really excited about the future?
I think with COVID, I learned not to be able to plan meticulously ahead. I
Yeah, everyone has a plan, and you're going to get punched in the face at some point. So,
right. I thought I had a great plan.
yeah.
Um, what I'm really excited about in a big way is this whole multi-generational workforces and communication and empathy and understanding of one another and communication and listening. I think our society needs that a lot right now. So I do see Mariposa Wellness evolving more and more in that direction. Not letting go of the wellness ever and stress management ever, because I think that they go hand in hand. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and everything I teach, that element is there. So even if I'm doing a lunch and learn or training on multi-generational workforces, there is always an element of breath. There's always an element of being grounded. There's always an element of wellness, of like understanding your mind body connection, because that's inherent to who I am. I can't remove that. Um,
Yeah.
some of the direction that I've moved into, we haven't even touched upon it, but I'm originally from Argentina, and I have a big Latina aspect to everything I do. I've also recently moved into working with Latina and Latino entrepreneurs, founders, small business owners, helping them educate them on stress management and bringing it into their businesses and where they never thought about it or didn't consider it for themselves. I think it adds an interesting element of stress or perception or a whole bunch of other things that are going on um, to how they're building. And I'm really fascinated with that. And I've always sort of crossed multiple cultures and things. I think it's a really interesting place. So I'm working with a couple of colleagues on bringing more of this work into the community, the Latino community, Hispanic community that hasn't had a tremendous amount of exposure to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see Mariposa Wellness evolve into that angle too, more and more, just because I think it's super interesting. But again, I don't believe in letting go of your core and
Mm-hmm.
who you are. Um, and I strongly believe this should be offered to everybody and available to everybody.
Yeah.
I had an interesting call today about doing more work, government, city education, things like that, which I think could be really interesting. But again, not for the students and not necessarily for teachers or professors. Sorry, but for teachers, professors, staff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
train the trainer model. I, I I
Yeah.
would really like Mariposa Wellness now to go more into train the trainer model on those kind of contracts. I think that would be really interesting to make a wider impact and continue the whole hybrid thing. I don't know, Dan. Maybe if you speak to me in a year, maybe I'll finally succumb to the whole app thing, platform thing, but not quite ready
Yeah.
yet. But we'll see. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll add AI.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, and we'll have to do a part two to the conversation because I think that the topics that we are covering, which is sort of health and wellness and the future of work, whether that's in a more corporate space or like you even mentioned more in like the kind of the startup world, like kind of the intersection of all of that is to me individually topics I'm really interested in. And so it's been a great conversation. And like you said, we probably could keep going on some other areas that we both find interesting. So maybe there will be a part two and we could talk about AI and your brand new AI platform that you've built. But in the meantime, I want to let you go. I know it's a Friday and probably going to be wrapping up the day soon. Hopefully, you got some nice weekend plans. Before I let you go, for folks who are listening that are kind of interested in this space that you're building in, if there's a way for them to get in touch with you, I'll include links to your like website and LinkedIn and stuff like that. But what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they wish to do so?
LinkedIn or just email. There is an info at mariposawellness.com or LinkedIn. either one is probably the best. I do a lot of events and trainings and things too with colleagues, and I tend to post them a lot on LinkedIn too. So if people want to participate or learn from those too, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, Karina, I really appreciate it. Thanks again for sitting down with me. I'll be sure to, include those links that I talked about, get this episode out there, and I'm excited to share it. And yeah, I really appreciate you sitting down with me and having a chat.
Great. And thank you so much, Dan. As I said, I love doing these and I love being on podcasts. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my voice and my point of view and my perspective. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Karina.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
We'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Bye-bye.